Good afternoon, everyone. This is Naishad Gadani coming to you from Melbourne. And today is 182nd episode of Career Care Package. And on today's episode, we are talking about acing interviews, how to be great at job search, how to really find the job that you're looking for. And to help us really unpack this interesting topic, we have invited Ange Miller. She has interviewed more than 5,000 job seekers in last 10 to 12 years of a recruiting career, HR specialist, and also as a career practitioner. So she has got a lot of anecdotes and a lot of funny, interesting stories to share with us. What not to do in interviews or what to do in interviews. We got so value coming your way. So if you're listening to this live feed, and if you think that somebody else can benefit from this, please tag them here because you do a world of favor to them. As we are approaching the Christmas, holidays, I'm pretty sure that a lot of us are looking forward to the break, but some of us are still struggling to find their feet in the employment market, and we are still continuing our pursuit to help you to deliver optimism right now in this still strange times. So before we bring Ange on the screen and she starts to give her the golden nuggets around interviews, job search, and career, let's welcome Caroline Brown.
Thanks, Naish, and I feel very welcome. And I'm sorry if you get any echo in this. We've tried to iron out our technical hitches, but we'll keep working on that. Absolutely delighted to have you here today, Ange, because I think giving people insights from having interviewed and being part of an interview process is absolute gold. We can't make it fun, as we were discussing it before. Looking for a job can't so much be fun, but at least be, well positioned. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Excellent. So do you want a good place to start, just to give people some context, is perhaps give a snapshot of your background and the work that you do?
Of course. I am from New Zealand originally, and I started my career in retail operations, and I joined an Australian business that was expanding very quickly in New Zealand, and I spent around 8 years with them opening 24 stores across New Zealand. This was a huge organization that I loved, but it had very little process. We didn't have any HR. It was all sort of wrapped up in each of those leadership roles. So I was running 24 stores at the age of 24. And from there, I decided that it was time to sort of do my overseas experience. And I landed in London, where I spent 5 years working for a luxury recruitment agency. So I had that experience of hiring internally. And I actually had never experienced being a job seeker until I got to London, and it wasn't an amazing experience. And I felt all the things that I hear from candidates, being offered roles that were a lot more junior to what I had been doing, people not knowing the company that I worked for, me not knowing the companies in London. I really didn't have any idea. And that really set me up for quite a tumultuous first 6 months in agency recruitment. And from there, I spent the next sort of 4.5 years becoming quite established within agency recruitment. And then I relocated to Australia, where I spent 3 years in internal HR and recruitment roles, before deciding that, all of my frustrations with being either, the internal hiring manager or the agency recruiter or the job seeker, that there was some really, key pieces of information that I felt all parties were missing. And a lot of it was just around being a bit more generous with information sharing and just helping people get to where they need to go. And, kind of taking the stigma out of job searching. It's not a big secret. It's actually very simple and strategic. So I started my own business really just doing that, I work with mainly small to medium-sized businesses that sit in the fashion, retail, or e-commerce space. And I support them to create effective people and culture framework, support them to find the right people and understand what that means and how subjective the right person is. And also I offer career coaching and LinkedIn training to career job seekers, anyone who's really looking to upskill themselves a little bit. So really just helping each party kind of come a little bit closer to center.
Makes absolute sense. And as we were saying before, like really needed type of work, and you can really, I'm sure you can see the difference that you make with people. Yeah. And just to pick up on one of your points, is one of the questions that I think we put in the questions for you is, what's the gap? So when you're helping small businesses, what are they missing in terms of how they run their recruitment process? Because I think that could help. Because when you go and look for a job, you assume, I think, that the process is professional and they know what they're looking for. But what are you seeing from the employer side that is a gap?
Usually just a lack of process and a lack of understanding. When you work, I think you need to understand the sort of business that you're applying to, and therefore what that might mean to the structure of that business. So the way a privately owned business is run compared to a founder-led business, compared to a publicly listed company, they're going to be very different in terms of their processes, in terms of how they carry out their recruitment processes. And it can be beneficial to just kind of anticipate what that might look like. So not to say that it's less professional, but it probably will be less structured when you're talking about a founder-led organization. And for them, they have a very small team. So culture fit and some of those critical soft skills are really important to them. Things like adaptability, flexibility, a willingness to go over and above your job role to do other things to help out another team member, because typically the bigger the company, the more segmented the roles are. So it's really important to kind of think about what kind of business they are. And most organizations need to think about where they want to go. But there's lots of little nuances that come with, starting a business. You are restricted by budgets and you can't always do the things you want to do when you want to do them. So it's probably just about helping them recognize when it's time to change their processes, make them, have a little bit more structure, so that people have a good experience, because that's really important. The ideal team member, I think, for any business is their customer. So if you're not giving them a good experience in the recruitment process, you're really actually hurting your business in lots of different ways.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember, I always remember the businesses that I had a bad interview with, not from a what I've said point of view, but actually unprofessional type experience, and many, many years later. So it really is quite a profound thing that, when you're sitting in front of an organisation. So having done 5,000 plus interviews, what have you seen? What have you seen that people, or what do you wish people would understand about that process?
I really wish that job seekers in particular, a good interviewer should understand that anyone is going to be nervous, and we want you to be nervous, not from some sick, thing of wanting someone to feel nervous. But if you're nervous, you want the role. That's a good sign. If you're not nervous, it doesn't necessarily show you're very engaged. And so it doesn't matter whether you outwardly show your nerves or not, but it's okay to acknowledge some nerves and say, if we're upfront about them, in terms of a candidate saying, I'm feeling really nervous, our human nature would be, quite quick to say, it's okay, just relax, it's fine, or, if the interviewer is noticing someone being nervous, to just really say, don't just relax. It's okay. We're just here to have a chat. I think that it is very challenging to build rapport with someone who doesn't really feel very comfortable and is really struggling to give more well-rounded answers. So when the answers are very short, which can happen when a candidate feels very nervous, it's very hard for the interviewer to build rapport, start thinking of you and that team and how you would go, So it is important to a little bit of fake it till you make it, a little bit of like smile on the face, that body language, that's how we connect as human beings. So even if you feel that you don't know what to say, as long as you're starting to kind of really lock in some of that mirroring someone's body language is very powerful in an interview. And good interviewers know that, and they will mirror their candidate. So I think that building rapport is probably the number one thing, over anything that somebody could say, because we're thinking about, could I work with you every day? Do you fit in with this culture? And if it's relaxed and easygoing and someone really can't, ease into that interview, it does start to raise some questions.
Absolutely.
I would say the other thing as well is, sorry, Nash, go.
No, go ahead, please.
I would say the other thing as well that I was speaking to someone else about is making sure your answers don't leave us with more questions. So, that's the idea of an interview. So saying leading comments or, quite vague comments, I think one of the things that I really have learned is I can tell when someone isn't being fully sincere with me or telling me the whole story. I don't believe in pushing that to the limit of someone feeling uncomfortable. But I would be starting to question, why is that making me feel that way? So I think it's very important to, I admire people that can talk about challenging situations and can be very honest, while also practicing a little bit of restraint as well. Like they know what is too much to say in an interview and where they should stop. I think that those are really interesting skills that can be transferred to any range of things.
Yeah, it's interesting. Nash, do you have a question? Because I just want to ask Ange a question around just that thing about sincerity. Like, you as an interviewer, how do you pick whether somebody's being sincere or not? How do you pick whether somebody's telling the truth or not?
So, Ange, can you hear us or not?
I think we've lost Ange, lost me, we've lost the plot, all of us.
Ange, can you hear?
I can hear you now. That's perfect.
Okay,
I don't know.
cool.
There we go.
Excellent. All right.
That's all right.
Okay, that's
what
fine.
happened.
But maybe
you go. I'm going to be quiet now. You go, Nish.
No. You asked the question. So the question is around how do you really get that the other person is sincere? How a job seeker can really demonstrate the sincerity in his or her approach to the work?
I think it's a multi-prong thing. I think it is, like I said, through the body language. You can tell when someone's passionate or excited about what they're talking about. I think it's through the inflections in your voice. I think it's through gesturing, all the things that I'm kind of doing right now. This is what I'm really passionate about. And that's conveyed through, tone of voice and body language. And I think that's really, really important. You don't need to be effervescent or particularly extroverted. That's certainly not what anyone is asking. But I think it's that confidence in what you're discussing that really is so compelling, and it really captures your audience, whether it's one person or three people. They want to hear what you have to say. and what your opinion is, you know. So that's really important as well. Outside of that, I think it's things like, you know, lots of things, you know, picking up your phone and saying your name first. Hello, it's Ange speaking. You know, making eye contact and a firm handshake and things like that, that it makes a business feel that you would be someone that they would want representing their business, you know, that they feel like, oh, there's a real confidence about this person. There's capability there. These are all things that actually might seem like an individual item or action, but actually all give us insight into how that person might be moving down the line.
Absolutely. We got a question from Poonam around video and telephonic interviews. And I think particularly the COVID-19 times is the video interview times. And one of the video interview that a lot of job seekers, including myself, have struggled with is the unidirectional interview, where there is an artificial intelligence system is asking you the question, and then it's recording, and you don't know whether you got it right or not. At least in a video Zoom interview, you know that the other person is nodding their head, or he or she is looking at this, and waiting for the answer to finish, right?
Okay.
So at least you get some clue of that. But this kind of things, because we have seen that there is the emergence, and I think what it does is that it actually picks job seekers from a larger pool. Yeah. Rather than a smaller pool if you're going to do it for a telephonic one. So here, I'm not into recruitment at all. So I think they might pick up for one role 25 people to do the initial interview, and then earlier they might do just 5 because it's the time consumption required. And now you've got 25 people, send the link, and 25 people will do. You listen to that, or sometimes I think what I've heard is that the system itself shortlist candidates, that this candidate has given the best answer. I don't know what the background is, but have you seen that?
So are you asking me, so not as in when you apply, you're talking about the applicant tracking software? That's what you're referring to?
No. This is like once your resume is shortlisted, then you receive a video interview. But this kind of video interviews are kind of that you get asked a question and they record the answer, and then they go away, and it's not that somebody is sitting like the way we are discussing right now, somebody sitting on the other end and asking the question. It's a software that is doing everything.
An automated
Have you
interview.
seen that? And what exactly what are some things that people can do with it? Because it is so not feedback that you don't know, and then you are sweating over it. Say, oh God, I should have said that, right? And they give you probably a couple of questions to practice, not even much more, many more questions to practice as well. Any tips on that, Ange?
Use the terminology that is in the job advertisement. I would hazard a guess to say that depending on how many people are doing that video interview, I don't know if a human being has eyes on those answers or not. So while I said, definitely still make sure that you're putting your best foot forward, you're using body language, even if you are just talking to a screen, practice that, just practice, and even, anticipate what questions you might be asked. And you can get a bit of an insight from looking at the job you're applying for. The internet is a weird and wonderful place that can give you lots of insight, and just to start practicing some of those answers. However, if it is, like I assume, a software is ranking their answers, then they're ranking it based on an algorithm, a keyword, optimization, all the rest of that. So use the terminology that is in the ad, because I give people this context all the time. We know what the general manager of Pepsi or Coca-Cola does, but the general manager of another business could have 5 employees. Without context, we don't know what it is. And the same thing for anything, an account manager, a sales manager, anything that could be generically applied to a number of industries. Even if that's your title, like, make sure that you're using the terminology that's in the ad, because that's what that software is asked to do. I would be blown over if software can assess your soft skills or your personality. So it's absolutely going to be based on the context and the content of what you're saying.
That makes absolute sense. I've had a couple of clients that have faced them, and friends as well. And I think that it's the unexpected nature of it. They're not really expecting how they're going to react to having no feedback and trying to talk directly into the camera. And then they say they get cut off when they're halfway through their answer.
So
I think, I love what you said there, because it really, I mean, there is the framework that they're going off to recruit, which is position description and then the advertisement and that type of thing. But the practice, I think, it's the unexpected nature of it that people get really, really shocked by. So,
I think you'll see a lot of businesses, and I would say, they would be larger businesses that are engaging that kind of software, because they wouldn't be a necessity for that in smaller businesses. Unless they were very digitally focused businesses, they might then present a process that included video interviewing. I'm of the opinion that software can only do so much. And even when I used recruitment software in the past, I never fully trusted it, because it's a computer and it can't tell me, it doesn't know as much as I do. It only knows what I tell it to look for. So it's a strict kind of search, and it doesn't allow for anything else. So I think, that's really tough. And I think software should only be used so far. But I understand from a capability perspective, a larger organization may have an agile team, and they need to engage software to try and pinpoint the most relevant candidates the quickest, because it's competitive. And if they don't get to them quickly, someone else will, and then everyone's missed the boat. So everything around this is driven by a time constraint, really.
Yeah. So what are you seeing with businesses that you're working with, particularly in Melbourne, because Melbourne's been the hardest hit in terms of lockdown and, the recovery. What are you seeing with the smaller businesses around types of skills that they really value right now? Because I think that would be really relevant to a lot of people that are watching.
Yeah. An affinity to digital and systems is really important, and it's never been more critical to be system savvy and to get your eyes across as many programs that are relevant to your field as possible. I had someone the other day say to me, it was a requirement of the role that they needed to know Shopify. Now, no coding or nothing too technical, but she said to me, I haven't done Shopify, so I just downloaded a trial instead of navigating the dashboard. I was like, right, well, you're going straight to the top of the list, because the initiative that she showed to do that was so impressive. Someone who had already identified that there was a gap in her skills for what we required, and then had already started to close that gap. That to me is so much more impressive than someone who was an expert but didn't have the same kind of attitude towards learning, and could critically assess their own capabilities. So I think systems is key. Small businesses thrive on digital focus. We've learned through lockdown, digital first, or you pretty much have to just hibernate and wait. So all of the businesses I worked with who are small to medium size, they actually thrived this year because they had a good digital strategy in place. So that's really important, is people who are able to upskill themselves with systems as they become more prevalent in the role. And then I really do feel it's, those soft skills that we talked about. We really don't see, a lot of adaptability, flexibility. We've got people that know to say that they're those words, but aren't so great at really showing some, really tangible examples of how they are actually really flexible or adaptable. Or at the first hurdle, when they're asked to be flexible, it's a bit of a challenge. So I think, becoming a little bit more, just okay with sitting in a little bit less structure. I think if this year has taught us anything, it's that you needed to be agile. You needed to be prepared to pivot and change. And so it's the people that say, yep, sure, no problem. Yep, I can do that. No worries. That is really what has impressed businesses this year, because I think if a business managed to retain all of their staff and continue operating, that was a huge accomplishment. To not make people redundant was a huge accomplishment for a business in Melbourne, particularly.
Absolutely.
We got a question from Arty that I matched my resume 100% with the online CV scanner according to the job description advertised. My question is, what percentage that I can expect my CV will get shortlisted? I think that's the question around the applicant tracking system, and more or less the kind of what job seekers need to be aware of. We know that there are probably hundreds of different or tens of different kind of applicant tracking systems. You can't really make make a resume that matches with everyone. But take us in the background of that, Ange, because we really want to demystify that. We have tried to do it, but every time we speak to somebody, an expert, we learn something more. It's like peeling an onion. We haven't yet gotten to the very core of it. So please go.
No pressure, Ange.
No pressure. Let's demystify it. Well, let me tell you how they work, because it's not about getting 100% score. Okay, so this is very subjective, okay, and there's lots of different ones that work differently. But what we would do is the questions that we ask you, very much if you think of Seek and the questions that you answer in Seek when you apply for a role, that is a form of an ATS. And that gives you your relevancy score depending on how you answered those questions. It actually doesn't have a lot to do with your CV or your resume. It actually more is the free text field or the multi-choice. It's what you enter into there. So it could be your title. It could be when it says, do you have 5 years experience or 3 years experience or whatever? What is your salary? Are you willing to travel? Like that sort of thing. So then do you have experience in sales? So that would be how a lot of them would give you a relevancy score. Now, the tricky part is that depending on how many people applied, it would really determine who we would take first, okay? So what we would do is we would get, I've worked with heaps of different ones. Some give you a percentage, some give you a green, orange, red flag. And what we would do is say, take the top 20% of the applicants, because for some roles, they might have 500 applications. It's just not possible to get eyes over every single application. You'd be sat there all day. And obviously recruiters, agency recruiters or internal recruiters are very rarely working on one role. They are quite often, well, to give context, when I worked at a retailer as their recruitment manager, I would have 60 to 70 vacancies that I'd be working. So it gives you an idea of the volume that recruiters tend to work with. It's a lot. They were more junior positions. And so as it gets more senior, we do a blend of proactive and reactive recruitment. So that means reach out on LinkedIn and then reacting to job applications. Okay, so it becomes a little bit more complex. But we would take that top 20%. So if it was 20% of 300, that's still a lot of CVs that you need to work through. And what most businesses are looking for is usually five applicants that meet the requirements. It's why I tell everyone job applications, it's so not personal when you get a rejection. And it feels very hard not to take it personally. Absolutely, it does. I've been rejected many times from jobs as well. The reality is the chances that someone's physically cited your application is low. And that feels very unfair, but it also is really down to the fact that they just simply don't have the capability or the capacity to physically check every single application. So, you know, the ATS resume, it doesn't exist, but this is why we tell you to tailor your resume and your application to each role and to change the language to suit the role that you're applying for. Because with, you know, you want to make sure that you are giving yourself the best chance possible of someone physically citing your application. And, you know, it's why I always recommend that you don't just apply through a job board. You know, if you feel that you are a strong applicant or, you know, you feel that you have a lot of transferable skill set, I always recommend candidates to reach out directly. You know, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Yeah. And there's no squeaky wheels in job applications or job boards. You know, it can be very tedious checking job applications in all honesty, you know, and it tends to be, you know, sometimes it can be more, you know, graduates or entry level recruiters that are doing that. And it takes a while to learn the skill set to say, hey, oh, okay, that person doesn't have exactly what we're looking for, but that's really interesting and I'd still like to have a conversation. And on the flip side of that, we have some roles that are so specialized that we get hardly anyone applying, and in which case everyone gets a call because we need to really spread out and think about where we're going to get this person from. And it's not always as simple as just advertising a job.
I think you've given people a really great insight into that process as well, because it's not like, you know, the ranking system, but it's not always a one size fits all. No. That, you know, if you get 95% on a,
you're not guaranteed a call.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah. So I think my biggest piece of advice is think about your reader, you know, when you're crafting your resume, and think about what they're going to want to see. So if you're applying for a role that is critical that you have a degree, well then, you know, you lead with your education. However, if your education is irrelevant to the job you're applying for, but your professional experience is more impressive, then you're going to lead with your professional experience, because we definitely do say you have less than 10 seconds. So if I have to go and look for the relevant information, I'll probably just move on.
Very good tip there. Make it super, super easy. Don't let people guess. Jaspreet's got a question further to our last question. I'm not sure if we can answer this, but anyway. Which ATS software should candidates use to make their CV for that job? I wouldn't rely on one. And I'll let you answer that.
None. You know, use Word. You know, really simple format. I always say nice, big, bold name, heading underneath, I am seeking. Yeah, like you want to tell people this is what I want. Yes, and then your contact information, and then an about section. Who are you and why would we hire you over the other person? And always in the first person, okay? Always in the first person. Third person is very weird, and it actually creates a barrier between you and the reader, okay? They are able to keep you here, whereas I want to know, who's Carolyn? And, oh, wow, Carolyn likes to do this, or she did this. Oh, that's amazing. I am, I would love to work for you, and then tailoring the content for the role that you're applying for. So when we talk about versions of CVs, it's not, I've got one, sales CV and one retail that has different roles on and off. No, that's misleading. What we're talking about is like, if it's certain terminology, then you want to tweak it and you want to make sure that that's there. You want to just change the structure up a little bit if it's a different role that you're applying for. So I would say, don't worry about an ATS resume. Worry about making it as clear and easy for the person who's reading it as possible, and using the keywords. So less thinking about ATS, more thinking about keywords. Okay, so keywords. So make sure you've got a keyword section, so that if you don't want to work those keywords into a sentence, you've got a section that says, I've got this. You don't need to give us a rating. If it's listed, you can do it. If it's not listed, you can't do it. So we don't need to know if you're a beginner or if you're intermediate or if you're advanced, unless the only rule to that is Excel, okay? Because an advanced Excel user is very different to a medium. But yeah, like those are the things I think, people really have this idea that there's a big ATS in the background that's saying yes, no, shortlist, no. It's not like that. It's a tool used to help us identify the most relevant person to the role, but it doesn't mean that, you would automatically be ruled out.
Makes perfect sense. Nash, somebody's got a question for you.
Yeah, and I think Jasprit, if you want to, there's a platform called Job Scan. So I think if you create a resume and if you want to just figure out that whether your resume is kind of matching the job description, I think that's a best available tool that you can post. You can put on the one side the job description, and on the other side the your resume, and I think it goes and matches that and gives you percentages. Now, I don't know really the effectiveness of it, but a lot of people raves about it. So I think that would be my view, to go and get a sense of it. You don't have to. It kind of gives you, it just gives you a guideline of whether you are completely out of the context, or you're there, and you might need to then go and tweak a few things.
And there's no harm
so David's got a
all.
question. Exactly, I think that's available for free. As well. So David's got a question, that can we apply for the same job ad with the same company with the same role in a number of times? I think that happens, right? So I think sometimes the companies re-advertise the position, right? And you missed out at the first time. Can you go and do it? My gut feel would say I would do it, but I would rather call them and figure out whether there was anything missing in my last application that wasn't there. I think that's just very important. You don't want to kind of do the same resume again because it hasn't produced the result. What would be your suggestion, Sanj?
You can try calling, but if you can't get through, then just apply, because as I said, the chances that someone didn't physically cite your application last time is high. So it will show in the system, in all recruitment software, it will show us if you've applied before. And that's simply to flag if you've been interviewed and they felt you weren't. Usually there'd be feedback there around the level of suitability and perhaps good candidate but not quite right for this role, or a lot of businesses have a talent pool, so most software will flag if you've had a previous application, but as to my knowledge, there's nothing that would stop your application going through if you've applied before. So I would just say, go for it. I think give them a call or an email, and there's always going to be a point where you say, okay, draw a line. That's obviously not the role for me, so I wouldn't suggest doing it over and over again. And we did have, I remember in London, a couple of candidates that applied no matter what the role was. They applied for every single role. So, we knew that person's name. And so it's quite funny, but I did feel really, on the other hand, I also thought, obviously this person's really, really wanting to find a role. But, the fact that it was 6 consultants could all see that they were applying for every single role, it sort of felt like, okay, I don't think they're really tailoring their application here. I think it's just sort of spam, getting sent off as spam. But I think you've got nothing to lose, right? And you only get the opportunities that you take. So if you just wanted to pop it in again, but yeah, you could then perhaps use the software that you were referring to, JobScan. I mean, Word also has a resume editor in there as well. So that it also has a link to LinkedIn as well, Word. So if you have the latest version, so it can kind of tell you a bit about the keywords that you might want to use. And then if you want to tailor it slightly and just apply again, you never know. And I can't tell you the amount of people this year that I've, assisted with getting a role who it's their 2nd or 3rd time applying for that company. And sometimes it's just taken a little bit of influencing and, just timing for that to come together. So there's nothing wrong with trying again.
Makes sense. Okay, we've got a question from Rebecca. I've given a couple of interviews for the same company, however, no feedback or follow-up call to advise of the interview outcome, which is disappointing. Yeah. As a candidate, you put in a lot of effort prepping for the interview. Any particular reason that you don't get feedback?
I would say that it usually falls into 2 categories. And one is that the person giving the feedback isn't particularly competent at delivering constructive feedback about why someone wasn't successful. So, I think most people are hesitant to give bad news, even though we know that those are great learning opportunities for candidates, and all they want is to know, so they know for next time what they can improve on. Look, I would say be proactive as well by reaching out or calling. You are absolutely entitled to some feedback. So I would try and obtain that as well, rather than waiting for that person to call you. When we talked about obviously some of the capacity of these recruiters, they can get very, very busy. It's not an excuse. But most, best practice would say someone who's come in for an interview or had an interview in person definitely should be getting some feedback that isn't an automated email. And that can take quite a bit of time, so I would be picking up the phone and emailing and just saying, I'd really love to hear a bit of feedback. And, there is going to be situations where you're not getting that, but I would say that it is less to do with you and how you performed in an interview, and probably one of those 2 reasons. Either that person is time poor and being a little bit disrespectful, or they actually are not competent in giving constructive feedback.
It's probably the least favorite part of being a recruiter, I think, is the disappointing news. But as you say, it's not.
Sorry, Carolyn. I was just going to say.
I was just going to say it's about the process a lot of the time.
Yes.
It's not the individual. I think if you've had an interview, you're a reasonable match, and there's probably not what you've done, unless you've done something absolutely appalling and scared the living daylights out of the interviewer. It's probably not about you. So
it's not. And sometimes it can be getting tangible feedback from the hiring manager as well. I mean, it is a real problem in the industry, so whether you're going through an agency recruiter, whether you're dealing with the internal recruiter and you've met the hiring manager, it's, getting that feedback can be a real issue. And I think it's around the process and things that people and companies have in place and how much emphasis they put on a candidate experience. And the ones that don't put an emphasis on the candidate experience, you know, invariably it will come back to haunt them, I think. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So we got a question. I think about the is it mandatory to add referee details from the previous
I
employer
can't hear you,
in the resume, or I think most
now
of
I
the
can hear you.
employers.
Oh, no.
Can you
I'll
hear me now?
ask you if you like.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you, Carolyn.
Okay.
Okay, so sorry, I forgot what question he was addressing. Is it regarding resume writing? Is it mandatory to add a referee details from the previous employer on a resume?
No, God, no. Yeah, like I think that there's, you know, they would want to think about who you might add in. But, you know, at the end of the day, that is actually a formal process that a company needs to obtain your permission to then go and contact your references about you. So you certainly do not need to add that information in. And, you know, I would never, ever, it wouldn't even occur to me. I would say 99% of the CVs that I see just say references available on request or don't even have anything. You know, if you know someone's going to say something absolutely phenomenal about you, you know, you've got an absolute cheerleader in the background, then ask them to recommend you via LinkedIn, and also, you know, you could include their details. But it's very unethical to contact someone's references before obtaining their permission or taking them through a recruitment process.
Yeah, so don't tempt fate. So,
No.
Okay, I'm not sure if you can still not hear Nash, so I'll just ask this last question from Ninu, who says, how much does a LinkedIn profile impact your chance of job search success?
Oh, that's like a whole nother episode. Very much. I mean, I'm shocked when I go, I will be honest, I look at every single person that approaches me. If they email me their resume or I'm recruiting for a client, the first thing I do is look for your LinkedIn profile. And I would say the people that don't have LinkedIn, you know, especially if we revert back to what we were saying is critical this year when we talk about being digitally savvy and systems focused, I would say at a bare minimum, having LinkedIn is really the benchmark, you know, and I'm always a little bit surprised and concerned when someone doesn't have LinkedIn. It wouldn't be enough that I would be like, okay, no, I wouldn't call them. That wouldn't be the problem. But I would be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Secondly, it's very clear when someone doesn't use their LinkedIn profile. And I can see that from, you know, the number of connections they have. There's no activity on there, which means that, you know, when we talk about that hidden jobs market, which you would have heard lots about, that's why you don't get tapped on the shoulder, because people think you don't look at your LinkedIn profile. And so, you know, there would be no point messaging you on there because you're not present. And I hear people say, oh, I only check my LinkedIn every few months. And I think, oh gosh, I'm on my LinkedIn 12 hours a day for the last 10 years. LinkedIn is probably the most effective way to get hold of me outside of my phone number, you know. So it's so important. It is such it's an online resume, and it should have
Well, I'm curious about that, because what's the doubt that it raises in your mind? Because we all look at people's social profiles. I think I'm looking for something that I might have missed, or to validate an impression, or just something. But when somebody doesn't have it, what's that doubt that it raises in your mind about that person?
I think there's lots of things, and that comes back to the questions that we start to ask. It's the same thing as like when someone doesn't have a photo or doesn't have an about section, you then think, oh, who is this person? Like I can't I can't visualize who they are. And it's really got nothing to do with what they look like, and more to do with the fact that the brain starts making connections, and we think, okay, I now know who Nash is or Carolyn is, and okay, yeah, right, okay, and I start to build that connection. I think probably, like I said, my biggest concern with not having a LinkedIn is probably it may lead me to believe there's a reticence to sort of update with the times, that LinkedIn is a powerful networking tool. It's not just a job seeking tool, it's a professional networking tool, and it's been around for at least 15 years. So I'm always quite surprised when someone isn't on there. It's not Facebook and it's not Instagram, and it is really built to create networks. So I think moving into this new era that we're in that is digitally focused, it alludes to the idea that you would need a lot more, that you might not be digitally focused, that you might not be systems savvy, and that would be concerning for a lot of businesses in this age.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So yes, LinkedIn's critical.
Yep.
Excellent. So hopefully you can hear me this time. We don't have any more questions. Great job, Angie. I think you've successfully tackled every question that we have been asked. So, thank you. And we always love to hear the recruiter's point of view or the employer's point of view, because there's a lot of insights into how they think, which is ultimately my resume will be screened or will be looked at by someone who thinks that whether this resume matches to their requirements or not. Right?
Yes.
So it's been absolutely fascinating to catch up with you, Ange. And we wish you all the best in your endeavors in making people job ready, helping them find great careers, and also helping employers find great talent as well. So thank you again.
No, thank you so much for having me, and I hope that helped.
It's been absolutely wonderful, and we've had a lot of questions, which I think reflects the quality of information that you've provided people as well. So, Nash, do you want to tell people what's happening tomorrow?
Absolutely. So tomorrow is also another open question answer session. So you can throw us any tricky questions that you may have about job search, about interviews, about LinkedIn, about social media. And we will tackle that like a fine and seasoned politician, and we will answer it for you.
Lots of document, give you information.
I love
That's
that.
right. Lots of talk and completely misdirecting you into a direction that you will never come back. But you will feel great about listening to our answer. That's for sure. Right? All right. So everyone, please stay safe, stay happy, look after yourself, and we will see you tomorrow, 3 p.m. Until then,
bye everyone.
Bye. Bye everyone.